Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammad wa alihi at-tahirin. Another important function in relation to motherhood is the elevation and the rewards and the spiritual growth that is entailed for her personally and her journey to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, her journey to perfection. Many prescriptions given for the mother, when we see them in the wealth of ahadith that exist, we see that the ultimate benefit is the mother herself. Yes, the status of the mother has benefits for society, but there's also individual benefits, spiritual benefits for her. She'll get closer to Allah. Now how? Before explaining this, the notion of mental constructs has to be understood. Although it's a very long theme, but I'll try to summarize it to the best of my capacity. Because the existence of mental constructs in this world and the abolishment and the vanishing of mental constructs in the hereafter is a reality which is even referred to in the Holy Quran. Our aim for humans is to attain to perfection. It's something we're all after. Even though we may err in relation to the application, we're all after perfection. In order to attain to this perfection, there are a number of mental constructs that humans are coerced into formulating in order to be able to progress in their journey to Allah, in their journey to absolute perfection. For example, a person and a plot of land, they both have a physical existence. But then they come and construct in their minds this idea and notion of ownership. Now, ownership can't be found in the physical realm of existence. It's a mental notion, and it's constructed by people. It has no physical existence, even though it has implications in the physical realm. So they construct this notion of ownership. Why? And this is important. So that people realize this plot of land now is mine, and they don't trespass or steal or usurp it. That's the whole idea of making these mental constructs. It facilitates the flow in our journey to perfection. Because if we didn't have a plot of land for ourselves where we could reside in, then this would inhibit, delay our journey to perfection. We need a kind of independence, a tranquility in order to progress. We would be suppressed spiritually if we had no land, now be it via purchase or rent and so on and so forth. So that is just a means to that end goal, to the objective, which is perfection. Ownership is merely a means, and it's constructed mentally. It has no physical existence. Or marriage, that is also a mental construct. It facilitates one's journey to perfection. But we come with the idea of marriage so that when you have a spouse, no one else can take that spouse from you. So we come with the idea of marriage. It's now your spouse. If we didn't have that mental construct of marriage, like with ownership of land, if we didn't have that construct of marriage, then what would have stopped people just coming taking your spouse from you? And if it was like that, you would have no tranquility, no peace of mind. And that would affect your journey to perfection. So marriage, ownership, jobs, certificates, all these are mental constructs. They're just a means for you to attain to perfection. They're just a means for you to be able to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, the problem is that in this world, these mental constructs, we treat these as the objective. The objective was perfection, but we treat ownership, my land, my spouse, my job, my knowledge, and then we get drowned in them. We really think it's ours. We get drowned in it. These were just a means for you to get to perfection, but now they've become the goal. So you always think of a better and a better job, bigger and a bigger land, and so on and so forth. Not that these things are bad, but you have to remember these are just a means to something else. But now they've become the goal. And that's the definition of the worldly life. Wherever in the Quran there's talk of the worldly life, it's because they're drowned in these mental constructs. Now these mental constructs exist in this physical realm of existence. But in the hereafter, which is immaterial, and there's nothing physical about the hereafter, these mental constructs then vanish. They don't exist anymore. In the Holy Quran there's one verse which reads يَوْمَ يَفِرُّ الْمَرْءُ مِنْ أَخِيهِ وَأُمِّهِ وَأَبِيهِ وَصَاحِبَتِهِ وَبَنِيهِ. On that day in the hereafter, man will escape, will flee from his brother, mother, father, spouse and children. What does it mean for a man or a person to flee from, to escape from, to be disconnected from all these family members who were family members in this world? Does it mean that everyone, the hereafter also is physical, like here, and then everyone is together, and then man is scared, and the person escapes, a physical escaping? No. There's something else here. There's something else that this verse wants to say. When it says every person flees from brotherhood, flees from motherhood, their mother, flees from their father, their spouse, their children, all these were mental constructs in this world. Marriage was a mental construct. Assigning children, a mental construct. Look. Daughterhood, sonhood, kinship, it's a mental construct. Yes, it's based on a physical reality, but the idea is it's a means for your progression towards perfection. But we treat them as the goal. The point is, in the hereafter, man flees from all this. Here, this verse is referring to a real, natural phenomenon, cause and effect, which is going to happen in the hereafter. What is that? It's the abolishment and the vanishing of mental constructs. What was a mother in this world is no longer a mother in the hereafter, like it was in this world. What was your spouse in this world, it doesn't apply in the hereafter in the same manner. What was your children in this world, it won't apply the same in the hereafter. There's a total disconnection. It's only you and your actions now in the hereafter. No one else. All those were worldly means for you to get to perfection. For you to act in order to attain to salvation. But now the world has come to an end and you're in the hereafter. It's a different story now. All these mental constructs, they're non-existent in the hereafter. They were only for this world. And therefore, this fleeing from these mental constructs, it's a reality which is going to happen in the hereafter. And then the verse continues, لِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ مِّنْهُمْ, that amongst them, with every person amongst them, شَأْنٌ, they have a status quo, يُغْنِي, which will be appropriate for them. Everyone will have their due, how they acted. Everyone will be preoccupied with what they did in this world, their actions. For every person, they are their actions, and they'll be preoccupied with it. But motherhood, fatherhood, sons, daughters, spouses, all these were mental constructs. They won't remain there. And if there sometimes is talk of wives, husbands, mothers, fathers, children in the hereafter, it is not the same meaning as they apply to in this world. These mental constructs in this world, it's going to all vanish in the hereafter. So that was the meaning of mental constructs, and in that verse it's referring to this. Now, a mother who's also a human, originally independently a human first, then she's a woman, and now she's a mother. Here, in her journey to perfection, she has been assigned a mother in this world, having children. We said motherhood and children, these are all mental constructs. Otherwise, it's one woman and one male, for example, one female. But the idea of kinship, the idea of motherhood, that's a mental construct. That doesn't exist in the physical realm. Now here, as a mother, this motherhood, as a mental construct, is a means for her to attaining to perfection. For a father, the mental construct would be fatherhood. For the children, it would be childhood. But they're all mental constructs. We have to see, with the mother being assigned this mental construct, what are the prescriptions that the Sharia has assigned for her so that she attains to perfection. Attaining to perfection being she being Khalifatullah, she incorporating Allah's attributes. So, like the plot of land and ownership, here, like marriage and the spouses, here too, motherhood is a mental construct for this woman in order to get closer to Allah. And like that plot of land and the marriage and the job and the certificate, she has to be careful that she doesn't get drowned in the motherhood, like people get drowned in the land or the marriage or the spouse, the children, the job, the certificate, my house, my car, my children. She shouldn't get drowned in the motherhood aspect. It's a mental construct. So what is this mental construct for? It's a means for her to attain to perfection, incorporating Allah's attributes. How? Here we see a wealth of ahadith which show how her duty is in attaining to perfection, in incorporating Allah's attributes. Now, here, first of all, one of Allah's attributes is His Rahmaniyya, having mercy, universally. Here, the woman, we see in the traditions of Ahlul Bayt that it says that whenever the mother expresses mercy to her children, she may not be allowed to express mercy to any individual. But when she expresses mercy to her children, now expressing mercy to one's child has many different applications. like stroking them, kissing them, and other things. We see these different examples of mercy in the ahadith. For example, it says, with every kiss the mother does, or any act of love the mother executes to the child, with each kiss she'll be elevated one station. This kissing is just one application of expressing mercy. The ahadith may not mention all the applications, they may be innumerable, but they mention some applications of what it means to express mercy. Or for example, another attribute of Allah was His rububiyyah, His nurturing, His educating, being Rabb. And here we see that in the ahadith it says that whatever the mother teaches or educates the child with and nurtures the child with, all the actions and the knowledge received from the child will be the mother's in the hereafter. Look, this is how she's attaining to her perfection. The first said, whatever mercy that you express to the child, you will be a recipient of Allah's mercy in the hereafter. With each kiss, one station will be elevated. Here, with each nurturing and educating that you do, and be a manifestation of Allah's rububiyyah, all those actions will be yours, as if you are progressing. Yes. Another attribute, Allah is the granter of farah, of happiness. And that's why all those traditions that say, if you make your children happy, in the hereafter, Allah will make you happy. But this being the granter of happiness, it's the name of Allah. Look, all these are, as a mother, this mental construct, it's a means only for now you, with your children, being a vehicle to get to Allah, to incorporate Allah's attributes. A mother can't practice all these acts with anyone. It's limited to the husband, to the children, because we said motherhood. We're not talking about spousal. That's another mental construct that has its own formulae. So here the mother has to benefit from these prescriptions as a means to incorporating Allah's attributes. For example, forgiving one's children. So when they do wrong, when they commit sins, you forgive them. And when you forgive them, then Allah will forgive you in the hereafter, easier. You may not have repented for certain acts, but by forgiving your children and incorporating this attribute of Allah, the forgiver, the consequence in the hereafter will be, you will be forgiven in the hereafter. Yes. Satisfying children. Preserving your child's satisfaction, keeping them satisfied with you, keeping your children satisfied with you. Here, Allah says that one who does that, Allah will be satisfied with them in the hereafter. It requires a lot of ethical, very strong ethical disposition to be able to keep your child satisfied with you. Now naturally, there are exceptions here. We're not talking about if they sin, they have to be, disciplined, educated, and so on and so forth. But outside the jurisdiction of sinning, and if they do sin, you forgive. That was the first course of action. You shouldn't attack them. Then Allah will forgive you as a result, with your shortcomings, with your vices that you've done. But here, keeping them satisfied, it's a very difficult, deed. It's a strong sign that one has really built oneself in a very strong ethical manner to be able to keep their child satisfied with them. But if you do that, Allah will be satisfied with you in the hereafter. As I say, with sins and everything, that's a different story, it's an exception. Kareem, another attribute of Allah, the dignifier, one who assigns dignity to others. Here, the mother, if they assign dignity to the child, not belittle the child, respect the child, not attribute the child to negative terms like ignorant or misguided or vicious. Give dignity to your child. These are all in the ahadith. If you assign that dignity, first you are incorporating this attribute of Allah, Kareem. You're doing that via the children. So your proximity to Allah, you're being more and more Allah-like. And the consequence is that you'll be assigned dignity by Allah in the hereafter. So look, all these attributes, you are incorporating them through the children though, as a mother. So motherhood is a mental construct, a means to perfection, a means to getting closer and closer to Allah. But that's it, it's only a means. You shouldn't get drowned in it. It's only a means, the purpose, the goal is Allah. Motherhood isn't the goal. Yes. Yes, so that was the Kareem, one who gives dignity. So for example, when someone makes a mistake or out of ignorance or misguidance, you quickly let go. And for the mother, it applies primarily to the children. Teaching, for example, when the mother teaches, for example, the Quran or namaz or wudu to the child, this attribute of mu'allim that she should manifest. Here, the traditions speak of her being clothed with 2 garments of light when they teach the children the Quran, for example. She is manifesting this attribute of Allah, mu'allim. The consequence in the hereafter is robes of light. She will be robed with garments of light. Rafiq is one of Allah's attributes too. It's loosely translated as friend, but it's one who compromises with you. They're a friend because they compromise. When you do things, they will, compromise themselves so that the relationship be preserved, be held. The mother has to be a rafiq to the child, compromised with the child. It's not all black and white. It's not all 0 or 100%. If they do things, you, to the best of your capacity, you compromise with them. You work with them. Like that, Allah will work with you, compromise with you in the hereafter. So the list continues. The point is that with all these attributes that we've mentioned, one aspect is you incorporating them and as a result becoming more and more Allah-like, your qurb, your proximity being enhanced, and the consequence in the hereafter you will benefit too with each one. So in brief, in summary, to end, motherhood is a mental construct and it uses these prescriptions to get closer to Allah. And for her, this has to be practiced primarily on her children. She can't do it all on other people. For her, it's with the children. And they're here, when you're gifted with this status of motherhood, it's like a gift for you to get closer to Allah. I'll just end with one last point, is that when we say incorporating these attributes makes us more Allah-like, and we get closer to Allah. There's a very special message here, and that is that a humanitarian, or not even a humanitarian, a kafir, someone who's a non-believer, totally, they may also incorporate these attributes. It's possible. For example, a kafir may be patient. A kafir may be compromising. A kafir may be the granter of happiness. All these attributes, a kafir can become too. So, would the kafir become more and more Allah-like or not? No one denies that the kafir will benefit as a human being. But humanitarianism is a very, very, very small dimension of Islam. Islam is a religion of Tawheed. It's not a religion of humanity. Humanity is a last resort, the lowest of the low in manifesting Islam. Islam, you need to manifest Tawheed. When Imam Hussein alayhi salam said, if you're not going to be your brothers in faith, at least be your brothers in humanity, which is a very loose translation of the hadith, there, that doesn't mean that brothers in humanity is a high rank. It's a last resort. It should never be taken as the first course of action. What value is something which even the kuffar can attain to? What value does that have for us? Very little. Islam is a religion of Tawheed. Your Tawheed has to be enhanced. So, someone may be patient because their parents were patient. Someone may be patient because their hormones were of a particular constitution. But that's a minimum. Someone can be patient because of Tawheed though. I'll just give an example, but it applies with each name, it has a different jurisdiction. If someone steals your property, you may be patient because your parents were patient people. But sometimes you're patient because you say all property is Allah's. That's Tawheed. This patience has sprung from your Tawheed. Not academic Tawheed. You have firmly incorporated into your heart that all mal, all wealth, all property is Allah's, not mine. Wealth is also a mental construct. It's all mine. That's wrong to say it's all mine. It's all Allah's. When you say it's all Allah's, if someone was to steal your property, here you'd be patient. You would go and get your right back. That's your right. But you won't be disappointed or make everyone's life a misery and complain and so on and so forth. You'll be patient. But this patience emanated from Tawheed, not from other things. And that's a critical distinction between a monotheist and a humanitarian. But I'm not saying humanitarianism is bad, but we have to appreciate it's a very small dimension of Islam. Islam and the ranks of Tawheed, it's a different story. And so, the mother also has to incorporate all these, but it requires as a prerequisite knowledge of Tawheed, and secondly, incorporating that Tawheed in her heart. Then she will succeed more with these attributes. The more she incorporates these attributes, the more Allah-like she becomes, the more proximity with Allah. That's her journey to perfection. Motherhood was just the means. And in the opening verse that I mentioned, it's a takwini, real cause-effect relationship which the verse is referring to. Because in the hereafter there are no mental constructs anymore. It all vanishes. So things like marriage, ownership, kinship, certificates, all these things, jobs, it doesn't exist anymore. It's only you and your actions. وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطاهرين. Okay, now I think there were some questions from yesterday and maybe from today. If you have any questions, please be open and ask them. Don't be embarrassed. Or yes. Assalamu alaikum. Yes.
Lenient with them, and you mentioned about bedtimes and meal times, and where do you draw a middle line? Like, you can't obviously give all freedom to the kids, because the kids do need to sleep, they need to eat, and if you're just giving them freedom to decide, I'm hungry now, then as a mother, if you have more than one child, you're always going to be like in the kitchen cooking, and they obviously need a certain amount of sleep to grow and be healthy. And if I gave that choice to my kids, I know they would never sleep. So where's the middle line?
Yes, well, normal children's behavior, whenever they're hungry, they will tell their mother. Whenever they're tired, they will sleep. There's no need to discipline them. Be rest assured the child is going to sleep. Be rest assured when they're hungry, they will express their hunger. That's the norm. There may be some exceptions. That has to be treated differently. There's a medical problem maybe. I'm not talking about the exceptions. The problem with disciplining them in when to sleep in the first 7 years and when to eat is they don't understand that. And they can't express themselves always. And they may not want to eat. And they don't have aql, they don't understand. So they take it in a very negative way. So much so that the trust can be broken. And in the second 7 years, when you're doing things, it's going to be very difficult to enact them. So, no, you shouldn't think that they will never sleep or they would never eat. Children, it's very natural. The animal instincts in children is predominant and it's overflowing, and yes, they will tell you. In America, they did this. Even in the Montessori schools, which is supposed to be one of the better forms of education. And they do discipline, though, with the meals, even to 2-year-olds. We don't have that. Now, I'm not saying we can be 100%. I'm not saying that. In Salat, do we have a mi'raj and ascend to the heavens every time we are in Salat? No. It happens maybe once every how many years? With this too, don't think that you can do it 100%. But let's first see what Islam says. What's the protocol? Just because we're weak, let's not play around with, the Islamic formulae given. We're weak, yes. Getting aids helps a lot, because otherwise the mother may break. And this was the norm in those days. Not only they had many wives, many aides, but also they had many breastfeeding mothers. Every child may have had 2 or 3 breastfeeding mothers. It was a very holistic system. All this is taken away. There's only one woman now and one child. It's a lot of effort. What was done by a number of people in those days, it's now done by one woman in the West. And it's only natural that she will want to escape from these responsibilities because she can't bear them. But one has to get as much help that the culture that one is in allows. And Islam has put many different ways before one. And then just grow bit by bit. Yes, and the trust factor is important in the first 7 years. You want to behave in a way that they are like a prince in the house. And then like that they trust you. So when you treat them like a slave in the second 7 years, they say, no, this is the same person who for 7 years did this to me. They know what my interests are. And now their aql is growing too. They understand discipline more and more. And then what are you going to do when they reach the age of puberty? All those halals and harams that they have to submit to, they have to They have to understand what submission to parents means before they understand what submission to Allah means. Yes. You want to follow up on that?
No, you explained it really well, and I appreciate that. Thank you. I think it's a lot more clear now than the discussions.
To add to her question, like you mentioned, the first 7 years, you listen to everything the child says. So how do you draw a line in terms of disciplining the child? Okay, at age 1, how do you draw a line in terms of disciplining the child? Because, okay, maybe the age 1, 2, 3, it's fine. But like once they get a bit older, before they reach 7, they will start doing things which are wrong or which are not morally ethical or something. How would you draw a line to that?
Yes. Then you would have to always turn a blind eye and try to prevent those scenarios rather than disciplining. To the best of your ability, those attributes that we started with, forgiving, compromising, those things, you have to always keep on forgiving, turning a blind eye. What happens is the mother, rather than focusing on the child, she's thinking what her friends and family members may be thinking. Look, your responsibility is with the child here. If you keep on thinking of what your friends and family are thinking, well, that's going to cause a conflict. Don't take them to places if you think they're going to continue with the bad habits and they're not, you don't discipline them, but you can, through a playing manner, try to educate them. But if they're still not being educated, here, you don't take them to those environments. Your primary responsibility is for the child to be free. He has to release that energy. Let them do whatever they want. If they break an antique in the house at 5 years of age, well, you put the antique there. And if you discipline them for breaking something, that's because you're attached either to that antique or for your own goods. But don't discipline the child. You'll have time for that. The time for that will come. There's no hurry. Be rest assured your time will come, then you can discipline. But in the first 7 years, no. To the best of your capacity, try to minimize it. For example, sweets, computer games, these are things that the child never knew what these things, they don't know what these things are. You introduced it to them. The idea of preventing is this, yes. When they go to their friends, they're going to see all this thing. Well, maybe you have to decide. You have to make a decision. Is it your child has priority or your friends? Are you ready to compromise with how to educate your child and bear the child in the first 7 years? Or is your priority what your friends think of you? Sorry, yes.
Another question, not related to this topic, but I think sometime last year when you had a lecture, you'd brushed on it. Can you throw some light on how, like we know that sibling jealousy is a common thing. Can you throw some light on how you would Islamically be able to deal with that? Sibling jealousy or sibling rivalry, like if you have more than one kids at home, then how would you deal with that?
Well, it depends on the ages of the children. Yes. You have to give me a bit more, yes.
Yeah, all under, I mean, maybe all under 6, all under 7.
Right, and what do they do?
You can tell that when someone is not happy with the other, then they would do acts to make the other one cry or something along those lines. Then how would you deal with that?
I mean, it's a very broad question that we have to see what the causes are that a child is behaving in a different manner. Just merely hitting another sibling doesn't mean that they're jealous. Sometimes they can't express emotions and they do it in that way. They don't understand. It's very difficult to say, attribute the term jealousy to them. It may not be. But whatever the situation is, the mother and the father, who are the primary educators at that age, or if they go to nursery, you have to then investigate beyond the household and see the teachers at the nursery, how they're behaving. But if you do see any form of abnormal behavior, you would have to try to establish the causes. Establishing the causes would be very difficult if the child isn't under your supervision throughout the day. And so many acts by, let's say, nursery teachers or maybe grandparents, uncles, aunts to the child, it can easily lead to complications. And therefore, yes, that has to be monitored to see what has the child been susceptible to. But it can be anything. Yes. The more they're under the mother's auspices in the earlier years, the safer it is. Yes. Yes, no problem, yes.
Yesterday, we were having a discussion, and you mentioned foster mothers, and my question is, like, adopting a child who's an orphan, or so I understand the value that a mother has in Islam, but when you adopt a child or an orphan, it doesn't have the same importance. I don't know. Emphasis, or it's not the same, and it's very the fiqh side of it is very difficult. I don't know if you can shed some light. So we were discussing in terms of, there's so many orphans out of these war-torn Islamic countries, but adopting them isn't seen as in a positive light. Wouldn't that be the highest express of love we can show these children?
Yes. You can manifest those attributes of rububiyyah, rahmaniyah, jamal, and all these things we mentioned today through orphans. Yes, there's no problem. And adoption is allowed in Islam. But since they're not kinship in the natural cause and effect manner, there are rules of mahramiyah which have to be abided by. So they're doing a very good service, and they're showing a lot of love. And sometimes by service I don't mean in the mechanical manner. They're showing a lot of love to the child, and definitely it's a very noble act. All those ahadith on how to treat orphans and so on and so forth. So it's a good thing, and in Shiism we do accept it. Other denominations don't. But there are some guidelines that have to be maintained. But if someone, for whatever reason, doesn't have any children or can't have children, that would be a very good option. If they have children and then they want to also adopt, that's okay. But they have to be very careful to not show any bias to any. And that's very difficult. And that can lead to grudges for the child. But it's still better than the child where they are in institutes where they're not shown as much love as they could have been shown with you. Yes.
Can you explain how is it allowed? Because doesn't the female child remain non-mahram to the adopted father, and also the male child remains non-mahram to the adopted mother once they reach puberty? So how does it?
That's what I mean. They have to be. It has to be controlled. So, for example, if you want to adopt, let's say, a female orphan, for example, or a non-orphan, do it during. If you want to do it for a child who is over 2 years of age, it's going to be very difficult, but it's still allowed. But you have to maintain the halals and harams. The man, in relation to the female orphan, the man can provide, sustain, and do many things, but can't touch or see her in certain forms after puberty, because they're non-mahram. But if the child was breastfed by the woman's sister, who is also with child at that time, or other family relations, then that would lead to a form of mahramiyah. The mother would now be a ridai, a breastfeeding aunt. You would solve the mahramiyya issue. Or if the sister of the man was to breastfeed, that man would become mahram to that girl, would be the ridai maternal uncle. You see? But that you can only do that in the first 2 years. Yes. These are the breastfeeding is the safest and best way for creating mahramiyya. There may be other ways, but it becomes a bit more finer then. But over 2 years, it's going to be very difficult because there's no breastfeeding, and it's still possible, but it can easily be abused. So they don't really kind of propagate the different methods that exist after 2 years of age. Yes, but still, even if they're not mahram, it doesn't mean they can't express many, attributes of Allah to that child. But they can't see the child, especially after puberty. Her body, her hair, those things, because they're non-mahram, for example.
A further question about male children in particular. Children. Sometimes there is inappropriate self-touch from the child does certain behaviors that are inappropriate. How do we, because it can, I assume, I haven't yet experienced it, but I assume it can happen at different ages. However, in the initial stages, when the child is, for example, under the age of 5, how, because of the approach that we're talking about up to the age of 7, how do we approach such things? I am assuming something should be done about it, but I'm not sure what.
I'm assuming by touch you mean the anterior genitalia, when they touch, yes. Yes, that's not masturbating, first of all. In the West, they say masturbating is a natural, something natural to the child. That's incorrect. But merely touching there, in the beginning, you shouldn't cause any reaction. When I say you, I mean mothers or fathers. They shouldn't assume it's masturbation. It may be something, they're just itching something, and it may lead to release tension, but they're not masturbating. They're just touching a certain area. It's not done with any ill intention. You shouldn't make a response at all. And in 99% of the cases, it will go away over time. But if you show any kind of reaction, you, your grandparents, your uncle, aunts, or anyone, if they show reaction, it can lead them to continue their ways. You still have to turn a blind eye. You shouldn't see this as a danger, because they don't think of, masturbating at that age. And then when they reach 6 or 7, then you can start the discipline. Yes. Yes, you just leave it. Yes.
About formal education. So based on what you mentioned yesterday, that the ideal situation would be that the child is in the auspice of the mother until age 7, when then the formal education starts. We have a system where in kindergarten the children are legally expected to be enrolled in school at the age of 5. So at that point, we have already introduced the formal education system to our children. At home, how do we, when we spoke previously on previous occasions about mentoring the child, so that you only teach the child what you know, particularly with Tawheed, as you mentioned yesterday. So how do we then structure a separate system? Because if the school is not an Islamic school or is not teaching values of Tawheed or Islamic etiquettes and things like that, how do we then start to structure that education for our children? Sorry, let's say if they've started it formally at 5 years of age in our society school, So do we then follow that, or we wait? We wait the 2 years or 3 years until they become 7, and then we introduce a formal, for example, Islamic structure of education?
Yes. No, wait, look, education. Education, the way you've structured the question. You've said Islamic education and other subjects like secular sciences or whatever. You don't have to take your child to a school that teaches Islam. It's not a necessity. The child has to know Islam, but it doesn't mean they have to be educated in a school which teaches Islam. They have to also be taught mathematics, language, all these different sciences. They have to be taught it, they have to know it. They also have to know Islam, but why do we have to rely on the schools to teach Islam? It will be much better for you to teach Islam. It will be safer. If you can't, you can get private tuition. Or the best thing would be to put them in contact with scholars. But if there's no other way, you take them to an Islamic school. That is also possible. But the amount of Islam that they need, first of all, is the wajibat. That the school, 90% of the knowledge the school gives about Islam is things beyond the wajibat. So in the first 7 years, you can teach them a lot in relation to preparing them slowly, in relation to salat, that's it. Very simple things. And the things which are entailed in salat. Now, let's say you take your child to a kindergarten at 5. Yes, that's very good. For 5 years they were with you. 7 years is just an ideal, but for 5 years they were with you. Now you've taken them to kindergarten, and now the kindergarten, they're teaching them things. If the teachers are unqualified, well, that's problematic. But if they're qualified, you have nothing to fear. You see? And if you take them in the second 7 years to schools where they teach maths, sciences, that's okay. You try to go to a good school. And if you take them to an Islamic school in the second 7 years, that's okay as long as they're qualified teachers. You know, it's a very rational thing. But Islamic education by the mother and the father, it's mainly the preparing them to be more and more familiar with the wajibat. Yes. One shouldn't try to explain too much of the Quran, because you explain it in a very simple way. Many stories of the Holy Quran didn't happen in the physical realm. But our parents are teaching the child that this story, like Nabi Adam and the tree, Nabi Dawood and the 99 ewes, we explain these always in the physical sense, as if it happened in the physical realm. And other stories like Ibrahim and the 4 guests, none of this happened in the physical realm. These were all what we call tamathulat, the apparitions. And we like to give these stories to the children. They learn it, and then it causes problems when a scholar 20 years later is trying to say what Allama Tabatabai is explaining, and they have this prejudice because they've learned something as a child from unqualified teachers. So, yes, you shouldn't overdo it with Islamic knowledge. Yes, you shouldn't put it down their throats. That's one part of satiating their character. Yes. But I'm not sure in Tanzania what the system's like, but for example, sexual education or sex education is becoming obligatory slowly. It's going to be incorporated in the curriculum in England, for example. Although there will be an opt-out alternative for parents, maybe. And here, first of all, it's your fault, the parents' fault, for living in an environment where education is like that, and the parents will be reproached in the hereafter. They could have gone somewhere else. But if there is no way, and they're forced to stay in that particular land, and Allah's order through the angels that wasn't this earth spacious enough for you to go elsewhere, if they really can say no, it wasn't, and there was nowhere we could go, and they are justifying themselves. Here, if you're forced in that environment, you would have to teach them sex education at the same time that they're being taught at school. That's very important. They should get it from you. If in some cultures it may be a taboo area, if you're embarrassed, get an uncle, another member. If you're embarrassed, the local sheikh. But it has to come from us, because it can cause problems. If they listen to them and it goes uncensored. So they listen to how they explain sex education and it's left and we don't approach it. That's going to cause problems later. Yes, no other question? Yes, okay.